Alright, so I just got back from a ride on the Coconino Loop in Arizona and figured it'd be cool to do a like post-ride build review. I feel like a lot of people put out videos showing like what they're going to be riding with, like bike-wise, and how they pack stuff on before going out on a trip, and I thought I'd do it after and kind of go through like what worked, what didn't, something that maybe like I wish I had. So either way, getting right into it. The bike is a Fargo Salsa. I'm not going to say too much about that. It's pretty widely reviewed. The bike's awesome. I did do some different things to it. I'm not running wood chipper bars. I have the Jones H-loop on there, and swapped out some different shifters and brakes. I'm using some SRAM, like the TT something or another. But they're like bar end shifters that I just have mounted with some Paul components converters. They work really, really well. The Coconino Trail is a pretty technical one. Technical enough that a lot of people would want to use full suspension. Rigid was totally fine. Didn't have a bad time, didn't die. But either way, I definitely wanted some more control. I think that having not drop bars like the wood chippers was better. Give you a lot more control just having these. Moving on. So just starting from back to front. All the bags are Revelate. They're awesome. Again, not going to say too much about that. Like, they're super widely reviewed. They're awesome. In the back here, just open it up and start pulling stuff out. Had a very packable, lightweight, waterproof layer. The fabric is waterproof. The seams aren't. The Coconino Loop is in the desert, and so I figured it wouldn't get rain. Never did, never actually had to use this, but it feels weird not to take a waterproof layer, so. Moving on. Inside here is a Sea to Summit dry bag. These are the best dry bags you can get, in my opinion. I really like these guys. I like getting the ones with the E-vent fabric in the bottom, so you can squeeze the air out. They're really good. This was just my clothing bag. I probably packed more than I needed to. Being in the desert, it was really warm. I was just riding in shorts the entire time. But inside here, have a Primaloft layer. Ended up using this as a pillow. That's about it. That's all I used it for. Had a wool layer that I never had to put on. Clean tank top to sleep in. And some underwear and socks. And that's it. That was the only clothing that I had on the bike, aside from what I was wearing. Also in here, another Sea to Summit dry bag. This is a compression one. And in here is my sleeping bag. I went with a down Fountain Hardware 32 degree. The bag's getting pretty old. The temperature rating is probably more like 40 now. It worked out perfect though. I never even had to actually like crawl in this thing. I mostly just used it as a backpack, or as a blanket. But it's good, it's very lightweight. Dry bag. And that's it. That's all that I carried in here. Moving on. Next bag over here, we have another Revelate bag. This is all the repair things that I took. It was a fairly short trip. It ended up only being 3 days, but we had planned on being out for 5. So inside here we have a Crank Brothers multi-tool. This is a Leatherman multi-tool. This guy's actually really nice. It has pliers on here, which you end up using more than you would expect. I really like having one of these guys on. We have some stands. I was running a tubeless setup, so it's just nice to have some more sealant. Here's a valve stem puller to also use with that. Got some levers. Normally with tires this size you can get away without levers, but these guys actually fit really tight, which is great for running tubeless, so I do need a pair of these. Got some Park Tool tire boots. And finally some zip ties. You never know when you're going to need those. Alright, next bag, do the gas tank bag up front right here. This one, cell phone, a external battery pack, come back to that in a second, and just a plastic baggie with like headphones and a power charger. Alright, so worth saying a few things about this bag. So a lot of people run a full frame bag. I've done it before. Full frame bags are really nice. However, I think that it's sometimes difficult to use them, or to maximize the volume that they provide. As the frame bag gets pretty narrow down here, you start getting really limited with what you can hold in it. But at the same time, you want to get the heaviest and densest items down low. It just makes the bike ride better. And so I decided to try a slightly different setup rather than a full frame bag. I went with using the 3 water bottle mounts, having as much water down low as I could. Usually that's going to be the heaviest, densest thing you're carrying. And then just went with what I think is called a tangle frame bag up top. And I really like this setup. I think I'm going to be doing this in the future instead of the full frame bag. I found that this space was pretty good size-wise and volume-wise. I felt like I could fit exactly what I wanted in here. Things weren't getting like lost down in the very bottom. I didn't feel like I was fishing around for things much, so I really like this setup. So in here, just have a small toiletries bag. There's like some soap and a toothbrush and toothpaste in there. Headlamp. Took along some tortillas and some peanut butter and Nutella in these cool squeezy tube things that I got from REI. They're just called squeeze tubes. They're like reusable. You can open up the backside, fill them up. They turned out to be really good. I'm going to be using these again for sure. Moving on. This was the water filter that I took. It's a Camelback all clear, I think. It, if I can get this open. It's a UV filter that fits on top of this water bottle down here. I really like this guy. It's normally perfect, but not for this trip. Being in the desert, the water was not exactly plentiful. The few natural sources that were available were not great. The water was very still. It had a lot of algae in it. It was kind of grimy, very silty too. And UV filters do not work very well in those conditions. They need the water to be clear to let the light pass through. I'm used to riding in Colorado, where we get a lot of snow melt and have a lot of these like fast moving little creeks where this is normally perfect. Arizona, not so much. I never actually use this guy. I think that going into the desert again, I would opt for more of a traditional filter, like something that pumps and actually filters something rather than just purifies it. Or maybe something else. I kind of need to look into it. So either way, not great for the desert. And that's it for in there. Moving on. Up front, I'm running 2 feed bags. These guys are great. They're super versatile. A lot of times I'll just throw food in here, like bars and whatnot. I ended up having to use 2-liter water bottles that I just picked up at a gas station. Because I couldn't get water from natural sources, I had to carry a lot more than I had originally expected. I think I ended up carrying a total of 5 or 6 liters at one point. So it's great to have that flexibility though. Moving on to the very front. This bag, I can't remember the name of it, but it's just the one that fits over the street roll bag. Inside of here is just kind of like a grab bag of all sorts of things. We have food, little plastic baggies, some sunscreen that just fell out. Carried a bunch of these Noon tablets for hydration. I think they really help, especially when you're just sweating constantly. This was a lot more full when I started. There's still some bars and goos and stuff in here. Yeah, it works great for food. I definitely try and keep this without as much weight as possible, just to keep the bike from being super front heavy. It also does kind of like bounce up and down a little bit the more it has in it. But either way, it's a great setup for carrying little stuff like that. And lastly, inside of here, so this is the sweet roll bag. This guy is great. Inside of here is my tent. I carried a small 1-person tent from REI. It's an awesome tent. I think it's the quarter dome. Also have a sleeping pad in there. Temples. And there's the footprint and the rain fly finally. gonna carry a tent, I think this is a really good option. Being the desert, I probably could have gotten away without it, but it was kind of nice at night to have something that keeps all the bugs off and whatnot. So yeah, that's it for everything that was packed on the bike. This is a pretty lightweight setup, at least for what I've used before. It was going to be a small trip, and we knew there were going to be towns along the way, so didn't take a stove, didn't take a lot of food. Really, most of what was on here is just water and then the sleep setup. There really isn't much more that I needed. A few things to note about the bike that are kind of cool. I'm running a dynamo hub up front. It's a Son 15. It's their through axle model. It worked really well. It powered a supernova light up front, as well as one in the back. It also gave me some power to this little USB adapter that's also hooked up to the hub. You cannot run the lights and the USB adapter at the same time. So USB would charge that battery pack that I mentioned before during the day, and then at night I'd use the light. Did a little bit more night riding than I had originally expected, just for cooler temps, and this light setup actually worked really, really well. Running a Garmin Touring GPS. This guy turned out to be great. The Coconino Trail doesn't have a map for it yet. There's just GPX files floating around online. I can link to those below. And so that's really the only way that I had to navigate. So I was glad to have it. And lastly, so also on this Jones Bar cockpit setup, I have another water bottle up front. I really like having this up here. This whole setup, by the way, I don't use a backpack at all. That's kind of one of my main goals in having a bike packing setup. I really like riding without a backpack. And so you don't get to have a water bladder or camelback or anything like that. So you need easy access to getting water. The ones down low are kind of difficult to pull out because of the frame bag. So I just put one up here. This is a little toe peak cage mount. I got it from REI, I think. These things are great. You can mount them anywhere. They're really customizable. And yeah, it just works really well for getting easy access to water. A few other notes about the bike. Yeah, the bike did awesome. Fargo salsas are really good. The only thing aside from the cockpit setup that I swapped out was the crankset. Stock Fargos come with I want to say it's like a 2842 or something up front. Basically, it's way too big of a crank, in my opinion, for the type of riding that you want to do on this bike. I threw on something that had a 22 tooth small ring and a 36 big ring with 10 speed cassette in the back. I thought this was perfect. I spent plenty of time down in the 22. There were a lot of short, steep climbs in some of the technical sections. So yeah, if you are taking a Fargo to any, more technical things and less road riding or less forest roads, I think you want to throw on a different crank. Maybe that's just me though. Yeah, I think that is basically it. Oh, the bag right here, if anyone's wondering. All of these water bottle cages are from King Cage, and this is a cage that they make that has a little burlap bag thing, or maybe it's not burlap, it's nylon or something, and a spare tube is in here. I was running a tubeless setup. It worked out great. I definitely heard a few punctures happen, and they sealed up real quick, so I didn't need it, but there's a tube in there. And there's also a Toe Peak Mountain Morph pump. This pump is great. The main reason is that it has a hose that comes out, as opposed to a traditional frame pump that doesn't have something like this. This makes it way easier to work with, and you're not putting any strain on the valve stem while you're pumping, so I think it's awesome. So yeah, that's it.